on flock advances to another round in Oconee County. Tonight, council moved forward with a ban on the now controversial surveillance cameras. Fox County's Ashley Listrom was in that meeting today and has details.
Oconee County could make history with council passing the first reading of an ordinance in mass surveillance. This makes the county the first in the upstate to push back on flock cameras and similar technology. That vote all happening right here inside council chambers after plenty of discussion.
We will not be watched at every second. We will not allow your stalking, preyful eyes to violate the privacy of everyday citizens who simply just want to go about their lives.
The ordinance, called Protection from Mass Surveillance, passed with one council member opposed. The meeting drew a packed house, and council members on both sides voiced their opinions.
Flock cameras are used for public safety. Therefore, I'll be voting no.
The question isn't whether or not flock can help solve crimes. It can. It can. The question is what limits should exist on the government's ability to use it.
The ordinance would stop county funds from paying for flock cameras and other mass surveillance systems. It would also keep those systems off county properties and roads, something some citizens are for.
It is about time that the county council utilizes their ability to control county funding to act in the interest of the majority of concerned citizens, to tell flock that we will not be surveilled.
Council also took another step Tuesday. They voted to require communication with the sheriff's department to access unredacted audit logs of the surveillance systems. The ordinance still needs 2 more readings before it becomes law, and the chairman says the third and final reading, along with a public hearing, will take place on September 15th. Reporting in Oconee County, Ashley Listrom, Fox Carolina News.
Joining me today is the Oconee Councilman, Matthew Durham, who led that whole charge to ban these flock cameras, at least on the first reading. Thanks for joining me here, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, so tell us the story, like how this issue has become one of the hottest issues in the country over these last 4, 5, maybe 6 months. How did you catch wind of this issue and kind of unpack the last couple, weeks or months?
So about 6 months ago, I had never heard of what a flock camera was. And I started getting a few messages here and there, a couple people having concern about these cameras that was popping up around the county. And I had no idea,
Yeah.
So I kind of started digging a little bit into it. When you first read out, okay, a license plate reader, you think like a toll booth license plate reader. And it seems fairly benign, but when you start digging into it, you see the back channels of how this system operates and what feeds it. I became very concerned as well, just like the citizens. And from March on, it started becoming more and more people reaching out to me. We had had some turnover in the county. We hired a new county administrator, new county attorney. So we had a lot of stuff we was also working through in the spring. So I was trying to get a feed underneath us. But by late summer, midsummer, I was getting several messages a day,
Oh, wow.
and I went ahead and reached out to a county attorney and said, I want to try to do something about this. And we went forward in the county public safety committee, which I'm not a member of. We have multiple standing committees. They requested that the sheriff come and speak, about flock cameras and answer some questions about it. And he spoke, answered some questions. He said that they had a case of abuse of the system early on. They put these systems out in 2022, and county council had no idea about it. We didn't vote to install them. The sheriff in Oconee County in South Carolina, they're an independent elected official. So we do appropriate a budget. We give that budget, and then he takes it and operates within that, generally how he pleases. So we had no vote on it.
I just want to stop you there. Did you say they installed these cameras in 2022 in your county?
That's correct. For their first one in 2022. And
Okay.
we had no idea about it. I didn't know anything about it till March.
So you guys, the county council, they appropriate money to, I'm assuming, the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office went out and started installing these cameras 4 years ago?
That's correct. Yes. So we appropriate an operating budget to them, and the budget we appropriate isn't every single purchase, that they make.
Yeah.
And so in that came the flock cameras. And a lot of people are
Okay.
surprised. They think, county council, we sat out there and approved them. It's just not the case, not the way it works. A little bit different than municipalities where you have a city council and the police chief works for the mayor and the city council. It's
Hmm.
not the case in the county.
Yeah, sure. I'm assuming the sheriff is elected, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I'm curious at this meeting because this just happened. What was this? Tuesday night? You guys had this meeting?
The meeting to first reading of the ordinance was
Yep.
Tuesday night.
Tuesday night. And so what was the outpouring of folks from the community and what were they saying about it? Or maybe even start with what were the emails or the phone calls back in March? Like what are the people concerned about?
So people concerned about they don't want to be trapped by the
Yeah,
government.
I
Oconee
do.
County is a conservative county,
Yeah,
uh, but this is also a bipartisan across all
for
political
sure.
ideology issues. Uh, People don't want to be tracked. They don't want the government tracking. They don't want warrantless surveillance. When they've done nothing wrong. They follow where they go to church, what political meetings they go to, or just to the doctor in the grocery store. So it started in March and building, and about late spring, I just kind of put a little teaser post out on Facebook, saying, this is a conversation we're about to have,
Yeah.
and kind of monitor them comments too, and then leading up to uh, Tuesday's meeting, I had to put out a Facebook video talking about it and the concerns I have. That's leading up to the sheriff coming to speak. And then I put out ahead of Tuesday's meeting about the ordinance we're bringing forward. And mostly, what we experienced was a sense of relief, that
Yeah.
somebody's going to do something.
Yeah. That
And
is refreshing. I mean, people are so accustomed to like fighting these types of fights for years on end. So just to see in about 6 months, 5 months, probably, if you said the outrage started in March, to see you guys have at least a first reading this week, 5 months later, and then in a vote of 4-1, voting to at least go on to a second reading. I'm assuming. I don't know your
we have three
procedures.
readings.
Yeah, so you have a total of 3 readings. So the
Yeah.
first reading gets it to a second and hopefully a third. Um,
And it started slow. Like it started a few in
yeah,
March, kind of kept building. And really, as the public became more informed of it,
yeah,
back in the spring when I first mentioned it to my wife, she's like, "Well, I'm not against that. I want to be able to find missing children."
yep,
And then herself, once she started looking into it, she's like, "No, we got to get rid of these things." And I think that's the sentiment a lot in the public's had is they first see it, they see this benign single photo of a vehicle, and then once you start learning, it's building this massive database that can track your movements across jurisdictions, state lines, whatever. That's when people started waking up to, I don't want this in my
yeah.
community.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Flock is also now trying to do predictive behavior where they're taking
Yeah.
their data to say, boy, the way that person's behaving, we think they are going to commit a crime in the future. And that's like straight out of the Minority Report
Yeah.
movie from 20 some odd years ago that, was seemed way too sci-fi-y and way too unrealistic. That stuff would never happen. But now the technology's there. And I'm
How
sure these folks are
terrifying,
going to push it.
it's just
Yeah.
terrifying. And one thing we've stressed is like for us, it's not a lack of trust in our own sheriff or sheriff's department.
Yeah.
Uh, but this technology is also not controlled locally. So anybody can
Mhm.
access it outside. And you also sheriffs come and go. Councils come and go, but you're building an infrastructure that's going to be here to stay if you don't take a hold of it now that
Yeah.
can be weaponized and abused against the citizens.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it should be scary stuff. And I doubt you're anti law enforcement. I'm certainly not anti law enforcement, but that's the way the supporters of these flock cameras message is,
Yeah.
well, then you're anti law enforcement. And of course, that's
We
wrong. We're pro civil liberties.
That's right. And we've supported our law enforcement in Oconee County heavily through significant pay raises in recent years. We was first in the state to install ballistic windshields in all the vehicles. Following we had a tragic incident where a deputy was shot through the windshield.
Mm.
So we've been trying to provide the top of the line protective equipment and salaries. We're very pro law enforcement, but just because a tool makes law enforcement job easier doesn't mean you get to trample on civil liberties to use it. And I
Yeah,
tell people we could get rid of due process. There's all kind of stuff that we could
exactly.
do away with and make law enforcement's job easier. But the Constitution was written to restrain government for a reason.
Well, I'm assuming even as a county councilman, you must have taken an oath to probably the US Constitution, maybe the South Carolina Constitution as well?
So that's what I've been trying to push out to other communities. You hear a lot of council members say, "Well, we're not the sheriff. The sheriff, has jurisdiction." Uh, But we all, including the local sheriffs in South Carolina, took an oath to the Constitution of the United States and the state. And it's upon us to defend that Constitution, not to sit back and wait for a court or a higher governmental power to tell us we crossed the line. I mean, that oath is to defend it where we stand. And we try to do that a lot in Oconee County. Uh, we can't control DC or Columbia, but
Yeah.
we can control right here. So we on flock or whatever issue it is, we say we try to control where feet are. You've heard the saying about the brush fires of freedom. We try to light them in Oconee County, and we hope they spread beyond.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. So this passed first reading 4-1. Who was the one vote that you guys couldn't get on board?
That's John Elliott. He's a councilman. He's wrapping up his second term, and he's not seeking a new term coming up in
Okay.
November.
All right. There's another candidate that's going to come
There
into the
is.
race.
There's a Republican and a Democrat candidate. The Republican will win. It's a heavy Republican district, but yeah, John, we find mutual grounds where we can, but we've been at odds, a decent amount of time over the last 6 years. But yeah, he voted no. He said that his the number one priority of council is public safety, and I agree that public safety is a top priority. But the number one is that the Constitution that we took an oath to defend.
Yeah, not at the expense of our liberties, not at the expense of our constitutional rights. I totally agree. And I think you mentioned this earlier. There's all sorts of things you could do to crack down on crime, but those things shouldn't be unconstitutional,
Right.
and they should be respectful to people's guaranteed, God guaranteed individual liberties.
That's stop and frisk is very effective policing, but you can't just randomly stop everybody on the street and search
Right.
them. So
Yeah, totally. Well, so I'm curious, does the county council have the ability to enforce this? Is there an enforcement mechanism upon the cities?
so county council, we control the county budget, and even though the sheriff's independent, we control the expenditures that goes to the sheriff's office. We do have home rule in South Carolina. I mean, you have home rule for the county, you have home rule for the municipalities. So we can't pass an ordinance that goes into the municipalities and tells them what to do,
Mhm.
but we do provide a good amount of discretionary funding to the municipalities. So we're attaching it to that lever of saying, hey, you're free to run these mass surveillance programs if you choose to, but we're not going to give you any more county taxpayer dollars, to help surveil your citizens and county residents as well.
Love
So
that.
ultimately, it's going to be their decision. Do they want to receive the county revenue stream, or do they want to keep surveilling the citizens?
Yeah. I love that approach. I mean, I think that's a powerful approach. And frankly, that's what I did in the Minnesota legislature to go, well, all right, if you guys want to have vaccine mandates, you can go do all that, but you're not going to get state dollars should you choose to do that. Um, so I'm curious, what has unfolded in the last 3 or 4 days? How does the sheriff feel about this? Is the sheriff trying to kind of counteract your actions?
So the sheriff, he supports the cameras. He spoke to council in support of the cameras. One thing that's disappointing is we have 46 sheriffs in South Carolina, and every one of them came out with unified messaging in support of the cameras. Not a single one of them said, "Hey, I took an oath to the Constitution." That's first. But Sheriff Crenshaw, he's not as hardline as some may be. He has said he supports restrictions and limitations, judicial reviews such as a warrant, which would need to come from state legislative law. So he agrees that there needs to be further safeguards and restrictions placed on it. So he's not hardline, but he's definitely a supporter of these measures. Councilman Tommy James in the meeting, he did make a motion with the ordinance that we reach out to the sheriff's department to receive the unredacted audit logs for the uses of the cameras. And I've not talked with the sheriff since, but I read the newspaper this morning that before he releases those, he's reaching out to the attorney general's office for an opinion on whether to release them, because he said they may contain active cases.
Is that what we're looking at here?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we're not,
Gotcha.
we're not we're not asking for case files. We're asking for the audit laws, which says who searched what and when they searched it, how many times.
Gotcha. Okay. So what could people do, if they're in Oconee County, South Carolina, maybe they're even just adjacent to it and they know these flock cameras are gonna, impact themselves. What do you suggest that folks do?
So people started reaching out to me months ago and just it ramped up. I called the sheriff and I said, "Hey, sheriff," I said, "are people calling you about these flock cameras?" And he said, "No, he hadn't received a single call."
Oh,
So, number one thing I say is call Sheriff Mike Crenshaw, let him know how you feel. And then also come to the public hearing for the third and final reading is September 15th. I believe we'll push this through to the finish line, but it's also good to see public support, to make sure everything stays solid. Because if you don't, the other side will show up, and they may be a minority. To me, this is a 90-10 issue. We've done a
yeah.
lot of stuff in Oconee County that's been controversial, split along partisan lines. But this is, to me, the least controversial thing we've done. But we still need public support and the public come out and show, you know, what your will is. And so, two things, I call Sheriff Crenshaw like you call myself, let him know where you stand, and then come out September 15th.
Yeah, I love that. These elected officials, I mean, they work for the people who elected them, and that means they need to hear from the people who elected them. So they have a very clear signal as to what the people want them to do. So I love that. Calling Sheriff, I think it's Crenshaw, I think you said.
That's correct.
Yeah, call Sheriff Crenshaw up. I've given the number. I'll give it a third time here. And he says he hasn't gotten any calls. Well, let's get him some calls and make sure he knows how the people in his county feel about these flock cameras. And I'll wrap this up the way I always do, because we're trying to empower people across this whole country to be more politically effective, because most people are politically ignored, they're politically disrespected, the politicians don't listen to them, but you can do something about it. If you want to be politically respected, if you want to be politically heard, you must be politically feared.